welcome to the Israel First television program from our studios in Jerusalem. Great to be with you again. We so much enjoy your company and thank you for joining us. We are the program that looks at Israel, we look at the news and we look behind the news, and we also have teaching from a Hebraic perspective. Now, in the news, we've been covering behind the scenes of the Gaza war, some of the aspects of what have been happening on a bigger scale, on the globalist scale. Well, this week I really wanted to cover some more in what's happening in the country itself, in Israel, and have a look at the news covering that. Now, one of the big stories is about the Israeli reservists, the IDF reservists or the Israeli army reservists. Now, some of you may know what I'm talking about and some of you may not. So I'm going to presume you don't. So basically the reservists are those who have served in the army at some stage in their lives and are called up at a later date. Now, in the past, normally the Israeli army itself deals with the situations on the borders, etc. But from time to time, when there's a bigger conflict, they call up the IDF reservists. Those are the people who are working in commerce, working in the shopping centre, working in the dentists, work as doctors, all these people who are in other professions, high tech, and are called up to serve in the army as a reservist. And these are people who do that. They volunteer to go into the army to serve. Now,
and they left everything.
Right. So I'm going to talk about that today, and we're going to look at the news about that. The first is a tragic story, but it gives you a bit of the background as to what's happening, in particular with the conflict and what's happening in Gaza. And it was sad news, but an IDF reservist who had PTSD, and we'll talk a bit about that as well, post-traumatic stress disorder, trauma, killed himself before his call-up. Eliran Mizrahi, who was an IDF reservist, was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, which is not uncommon with many of the soldiers. He took his own life after being ordered to return again for combat in the Gaza Strip. His mother said he returned from the Gaza war a broken man. And this is something we talked about before, the trauma to Israeli soldiers who have been fighting in the war. Now, Eliran Mizrahi came from Mali Adamim, which is not so far from where we're filming today, where the studio is. He was called into the reserves shortly after the Hamas terrorist attack on October the 7th, when he was assigned to clear, and a terrible job. He already started pretty bad. He had to clear the bodies of those murdered Israelis at the Supernova Music Festival. And this was a particularly horrendous job that somebody had to do, and he was involved in that. He was then sent into Gaza, where he served as a combat engineer until he was wounded in action in April 2024. According to Channel 12 News, Mizrahi was diagnosed as a disabled IDF veteran, and he was also diagnosed with PTSD, but received an order on Friday, June the 7th, not so long from when we've come into the studio, to report for duty in Rafah. If you've been watching the news, you'll see that there's an operation in the refugee camp of Rafah in Gaza. He then took his life after having received the call-up 2 days later. He leaves behind a wife and 4 children. Mizrahi's mother, Jenny, told Kan that Kan News is a news media in Israel. She told Kan News that he was injured twice. So he wasn't just injured once in the Gaza war. And during the 7 months he was on duty in Gaza, but that he refused to leave. The first time he was wounded, insisting he wants to continue to protect the country. Hila Mizrahi, that's Eliran's sister, that's the IDF reservist who sadly committed suicide, told Channel 13 news that he'd gone through hell in Gaza and that he refused to discuss many of the experiences from the war. That's pretty typical of anybody who's been in combat, but you know, we don't really know what he saw. He had rockets fired at him, he saw his friends die, and he brought bodies back, and he still did everything for Israel, she said. As a result of his time in Gaza, Hiller said Eliran was injured physically and mentally. And we've talked a bit about this on the Israel First television program, the effect of the trauma, not only of October the 7th, not only of the Gaza war, but of the whole situation on the psyche of the Israeli people. And he was told by a doctor that he would not be able to go back into combat. So I'm not sure how he got called up again. He was happy, joyful, funny, positive, an optimistic person, his sister told Cam, but he was the leading light in our home, and among his friends he came home different. We got back a broken man who was impatient with the children, he was angry, and he had nightmares. Now, the reason I bring up this whole story is, first of all, that you're aware of the story, but secondly, that you're aware of what is happening in Israel. This is something that's happening to many, many people. There are thousands of soldiers who are serving, and many of them have been affected. Jenny expressed her frustration at how Eliran was treated following his PTSD diagnosis, saying that he's told her that psychiatrists treating him said he couldn't be helped. Eliran's sister Shia told Channel 12 News that he had lost his soul to the war.
This is very interesting what you say, because I was thinking when you were speaking about that, we're all body, we have a body and we have a soul. And when the soul is damaged, the body can't function. And it's exactly what she's saying. It's like it was a soul problem. And so you have to heal the soul, which is not always easy, for the body to be able again to reconnect with normal life. And like you say, he was impatient with the children. It's like suddenly something is very disturbed in your soul, and you can't function normally like you were functioning before.
Yeah, and the Defense Ministry, that's the Israeli Defense Ministry, in April 2024 said there are over 7,200 soldiers have been wounded during the current war. That's in April. Now, some of those figures have been disputed by some of the news media in Israel, but just for the sake of argument, that's the figure. And 2,111 of them, it was reported, or 29%, are suffering emotional harm. That's pretty much the 30% really. And 60% of their emotional problems are their primary problem. Prior to the war, there were about 62,000 wounded soldiers from all prior wars and battles. Whilst post-traumatic stress disorder is the main diagnosis for those with emotional problems, the Defense Ministry officials say that they recognise a variety of emotional disorders. The ministry said it projects by the end of 2024 at least 20,000 more soldiers will be wounded during the conflict. Now, the other interesting story which I picked up, very interesting about the reservists, was because it's ongoing, this story actually, from Israel National News. They said the IDF, that's the Israel Defense Force, that's the Israeli Army, has published preliminary regulations extending reserve duty. Did you hear that? That's extending it. In other words, making it longer. Remember I said that there was a regular army, and then there were the reservists, and the reservists are people who've served in the regular army or in the regular military, in the Air Force or the Navy, and have been called up at a later date as a reservist. Well, what they're doing is extending the reserve duty. Now, remember, the situation is already bad for the reservists who've been serving in Gaza, and now they're going to extend the duty. Now, according to Can News, the memorandum of law is intended to extend the period during which reserve service for soldiers in combat units is going to take place, allowing for soldiers to be called up until the age of 41, 46, or listen to this, even up to the age of 50, depending on the role. Now, this has been never heard of before, that that soldiers will be called up at this age. The ministry justifies the proposal by stating that the IDF found that it cannot rely on the volunteering of individuals for service, as this reliance does not allow the necessary certainty for planning manpower to fulfill operational tasks during combat. In other words, it's not going to be so voluntary now. An additional draft order published by the Ministry of Defence includes an order reviewed every 3 years that defines some military professions, a higher exemption age from reserves, which is 45, 49, depending on the profession. Before then, the Ministry of Defence seeks to add additional professions where the reservist service will last for 3 years, including UAV pilots, those are drone pilots, UAVs are, civil administration officers, personnel in the tank regiments and maintenance, technicians for maintaining the ETAN APC, which is an armoured vehicle. Additionally, the order will expand the requirement for extended reservist service by identification and burial officers and prisoner investigation officers. The order states that the need arises from the large number, listen to this, of casualties that requires preparation in the short-term frame, as well as due to the increase in prisoner investigation activity. The Knesset, the Israeli parliament, has approved the application of the continuity rule to the recruitment law, and the proposed law will be returned to the Foreign Affairs and Defence Committee for further preparation, second and third readings. There's also, at the same time, there's also a big discussion regarding Haredi conscription. I think we might have covered that before. That's the ultra-Orthodox who previously, in previous years, have been exempt because of doing Torah, because of studying in yeshivas or yeshivat, and they've been exempt from military service. So they're extending all of the service time. They're calling up more people. They're calling up people who've never been called before. And this is having a tremendous effect on the country, and it's very important for you to know about that.
Yeah, maybe I will tell also about that, like a personal story. We have a friend, and he's a reservist, and he has been called, and he's still on the front. And so he's his wife, who has to be a father and a mother, and he's been already for 8 months now. And he said that also now two of his 3 children start to have stress and disturbance how they are, because dad is not at home, because of the war, because of all the things that's happening. So it's to show you that when the father goes away, it's like there is a lot of disturbance financially in the home, and it's going obviously on the moms and on the children. So it's like touching the whole country, really.
Yeah, and it's funny, you've jumped into the next story, really, because Times of Israel says, reservist spouse feel vacuum of absence as households come under strain. When the war started, nobody really knew about the length. Now, we've had even a 6-day war in Israel, as many of you will be aware, i.e. less than a week. And we're now, how many months are we into?
8 months,
8
going
months
into 9.
Going into 9 at the moment, which is a long period of time for people to be away. Men who have completed their military service generally stay in the pool of mandatory reservists until the age of 40. Now remember, I was telling you that they're looking to increase that. Shavat Ranan said nearly 100,000 relatives of reservists are now struggling to manage a household on their own. There is a change. This is a change that affects everyone, said Ranan, 31, a lawyer and a mother of 4. It affects the mental state. It affects the ability to work, because if the partner is away, the husband or the wife is away, it means the other person has to look after the house, look after the children. It affects the quality of functioning as a mother. Nearly 1/3 of spouses in the survey, this is that the Times of Israel reported on, said they had suffered professionally since the war began. In other words, it's affecting their jobs, which is another aspect of the PTSD from the soldiers, affecting the families, affecting the wives who are working in the economy. It's affecting people in the economy. It's affecting people in jobs, in schools. So this is really, it has a huge impact on the country.
You're right. And also people need to know that in Israel, people have more than 2 children. Most of them 3, 4, obviously some even more. So to tell you that when you have to manage 1 or 2 children, which is like a lot in Europe, here it will be 3 or 4. So it's a lot more.
Yeah. The Times of Israel went on to say that among the reservists and spouses surveyed, 6% said they had lost their jobs and 19% had to take unpaid leave. Now, they have had a financial package from the government, but it's not enough, they say. It's like putting a band-aid on, said Army reservist spouse Sagid Bakner. We need more. Bakner, originally from Argentina, said their 7-year-old son was originally angry at his father's absence. The psychological stress remains high for the partners of mobilized reservists, with the current number that the army didn't disclose. We need to take care of ourselves. This is the spouses of the reservists. Stay strong for ourselves and for our children, said Avital Horev, a communications officer for the Reservists' Wives Forum. She said that her husband had fought in Gaza for an initial 150 days and then was called up for another tour. We also find ourselves needing to take care of our husbands who come back from long months on the battlefield, on the battlefront, different, full of trauma from what they have seen and not yet able to process it. So the wives are acting as psychiatrists. For now, the war shows no sign of ending, and we also have the issue of a possible war on the northern border with Lebanon. Now, this, of course, is going to put strain on the reservists because there's a limited pool of reservists, a limited pool for the IDF to call up, and we could potentially have a conflict on 2 fronts. The families of the reserve forces, the nuclear family, the broader family, have a dramatic role in the force's resilience. In other words, if the families are suffering, it does have an effect on the effectiveness of the armed forces, especially if the conflict goes on for a long time. The expert who the Times of Israel was quoting for them, said it would be unreasonable to assume that the reservists will be at the disposal of the IDF indefinitely and at full force. So there's a big issue of mental stress, trauma going on for the country, which, as I say, has been covered in the news. The trauma is pretty much a regular feature in the Israel's mainstream media, and is something that you need to be aware of. Now, one of the things we've talked about before is, and this isn't just for Israel, but something that's happened globally, it's something that's happening particularly with the New World Order, the One World Government, is surveillance. The increase, the exponential, I would say, Nathalie, increase of surveillance. Many of you have been aware If you live in big cities or you live in a city, you're aware of the closed circuit cameras, the CCTV, the monitoring of cameras in stores or wherever you go. There seems to be cameras in schools. We've talked about that in Israel. Well, one of the things is the riot control police are getting a new vehicle which has facial recognition, which doesn't seem a big issue, except that I wasn't aware that facial recognition legislation had been passed. So not quite sure how that works if they haven't even got the authority. But anyway, this vehicle has facial recognition technology that has closed circuit television cameras on it. These are the ones that fire water cannons. Many of you are aware of them. You've seen them in big cities when there are riots or disturbances or protests, and they've certainly been very active in Israel because roads have been blocked, and you can argue that the roads shouldn't be blocked because people need to go to work, and again this puts pressure and stress on people that they can't travel across the country if the roads are blocked. So you can argue that these things should be used, but what is something that you should be careful of, or you should be aware of, is this facial recognition technology, especially the Israeli police use of this, because if we're not careful, we can become very quickly into a surveillance state, and it's very important for democracy not to go in that direction. Now, Gil Gan Moore, who is an Israeli attorney, told the Media Line, which is a news outlet in Israel, you cannot have a democracy without privacy. And this is the big thing about surveillance. How much privacy are we losing with the amount of surveillance that's happening in Israel and across the world? And they've procured, the Israeli police, these riot control vehicles with CCTV cameras, which can record protesters from up to 100 meters away from the vehicle, which is quite a long distance. And according to the police, will be equipped with abilities to clearly photograph and identify, so not just take a picture, but identify human faces up to a distance of 166 meters away from the water cannon truck. Facial recognition technology, of course, has quite rightly come under greater scrutiny from civil rights activists in Israel who say it's biased and infringes on privacy. The technology, which uses visual images to help computers identify people, is in wide use, from unlocking phones, of course, many of you will use it for that, to picking out a suspect's face at borders or mass gatherings. The Israeli security system has access to the information that will appear on the cameras and will be able to use it without a court order. Normally, you would expect that they would need to have a court order to obtain the information. The police use the data together or with the Israeli biometric database and the AI recognition software. So this is all working together. And it's capturing people in the public place. So this is not something very often that you're even warned about or know about that this is happening. And it can be permanently stored on databases. It allows police on the vehicle, the riot control vehicle, to receive a real-time alert from the cameras on the presence of a specific person in the camera's area of view. Now, we know when dealing with crime, especially serious crime or any crime, that these things can be very important. But when you're dealing with people who are protesting, these are usually, they can be
free speech
people, they can be professors, social workers, teachers, doctors, people who are from the general public. They're not committing a crime, they are trying to protest the situation. Then it does beg the question why they need all this technology just for that. And it is something, something that is concerning a lot of people in
and
Israel.
to be aware,
It's concerning a lot of people in Israel. The surveillance society and its exponential growth and its potential harm for free speech and for those who are protesting or standing against the politics of someone who's in control. So it's like, you need to give people freedom to be able to speak. Well, it's been great to be with you today. We thank you so much for joining us. And it's because of your support that we're able to bring this program to you, isn't it, Nathalie? We're able to come and into your homes, bring you news, bring you what's happening in the news, what's happening behind the scenes. I know a lot of you appreciate it, and thank you so much for those of you who've written in telling us that you appreciate the program. We love to hear from you. You can contact us at the website. There's a lot of information on the website, which is www.israelfirst.org. There's also a donate page if you'd like to financially support us. It's because of your support, your donations, that we're able to come into your homes and bring you news from Israel. And don't forget, we're the program that looks at the land, the people, and the language.